The man in black is a modern Kung Fu instructor and is the next to come up against a Jiu-Jitsu representative.
The Kung Fu stylist's only chance is to keep the distance and stay on his feet. If he goes to the ground, he becomes vulnerable. Using a kick as a distraction, Royce closes the distance. Knowing his opponent cannot escape, Royce patiently works on bringing him down to the ground. He's in no hurry.
A Jiu-Jitsu fighter becomes so confident in his ability to handle any aspect of a fight that he's able to maintain a calm and rational attitude.
Royce has the opportunity to seriously hurt his opponent, but instead he only slaps him, a humane way to demonstrate the superiority of our unique system. He toys with him like a cat with a mouse. It is obvious that the Kung Fu man does not have the elements to avoid this embarrassing situation.
Ref, step back, please.
Nobody would endure this many slaps if there was any possibility of escape. When he feels like ending the fight, Royce will turn his opponent over and set him up for a final choke.
Leverage, simplicity, and technique are the foundations for the effectiveness that have kept the Gracie Academy representatives undefeated for over 65 years against other styles of martial arts.
This Kung Fu instructor requests a second match, thinking he can do better the second time around. Of course, if they were in a street fight and Royce had been intent on hurting him, he would not have that opportunity. Many martial arts experts do not practice or teach their students how to defend themselves under realistic conditions because they just don't know how. They ignore the fact that 95% of all real fights go into a clinch and end up on the ground, especially if your opponent is bigger and stronger than you. Remember, on the street, it is more difficult than you realize to use those fancy kicks and supposedly deadly punches. Back yourself up with the best ground fighting techniques in the world and make yourself a truly complete martial artist. Once again, the inevitable.
If this kind of finishing is becoming disturbingly repetitive, these victories are not a matter of coincidence or luck. They are the result of calculated strategy and efficient training. For the practitioners of the striking arts, not knowing how to escape from a clinch and what to do on the ground is more than a weakness. It's fatal. Royce has established his position on his opponent's back and can now choose where, when, and how hard to hit.
It is important to notice that even here, Royce is using far less than full power in delivering his blows. When looking for a self-defense system, beware of the many styles that only teach one aspect of fighting. It can give you a false sense of security. If you're not learning how to defend yourself on the ground, how can you be truly prepared? At this point, the Kung Fu instructor knows he cannot escape. Having absorbed enough punishment, he will tap out.
Get over, George. He wants you on your stomach.
Yes. Okay, good.
Too many shots.
This is a 6-time Russian judo champion who also has had years of boxing training.
He wanted to test his effectiveness in a street-like confrontation against Jiu-Jitsu.
Notice that even a judo stylist, a man familiar with basic ground grappling, is susceptible to the clinch and a takedown when trying to punch.
Turning your back is the worst thing you can do in a fight against a Jiu-Jitsu expert.
the slaps replace what could be much harder hits. With a quick choke, the fight is over. In spite of a 25-pound disadvantage, Royler Gracie had no problem closing the distance against this KENPO karate instructor, who claimed to have developed a street lethal style.
The KENPO instructor intended to test his system against Jiu-Jitsu and then write an article for a martial arts magazine about his experience.
As you can see, the KENPO representative never had a chance. Once he was taken to the ground, he simply did not know what to do. A few hits, and he is reminded that limiting his training to only punching and kicking has left him completely defenseless against the painful reality of ground fighting. Unable to escape Royler's ruthless attack, he submits. In the second match, the KENPO representative believes he can succeed if only he's a little faster or a little more aggressive. Royler, as he has done 1,000 times, closes the distance, takes the fight to the ground, and latches onto his prey. Once the Gracie representative establishes his position on top, his opponent is convinced that further resistance will be futile and immediately surrenders. This Gung Fu expert, wearing yellow trunks, has 15 years of training and claimed to be undefeated. At 180 pounds, he had a 15-pound advantage over my brother Royce. The Gung Fu man will rely on strikes in order to avoid going to the ground.
It is almost impossible for a person trained primarily in punches and kicks to avoid being wrapped up and taken down by a jiu-jitsu practitioner.
Royce is determined to close the gap and take the fight to the ground. As they go to the ground, he grabs Royce by the neck. Royce will establish his position before getting his neck out of the hold. He repeatedly hits his opponent on the ribs, forcing the Gung Fu man to let go. He maintains the top position. The leg work of the Gung Fu representative reveals that he is not knowledgeable in the intricacies of grappling. Royce is taking the time to study the situation and ride the opponent. At this point, Royce could easily apply a chokehold and finish the fight, but he elected not to. There are many variables when it comes to ground fighting. Through a systematic, step-by-step approach, we have organized it into a science. The opponent is obviously in good shape. When Royce applies this choke with the legs around the neck of the Gung Fu expert, he has absolute control. Instead of finishing the fight, he applies just enough pressure to prevent his opponent from getting away. He can take his time and chooses where to hit. The Kung Fu representative is totally helpless. Not only he's running out of air, but he cannot stop the blows. It's a terrifying feeling.
Okay, stop.
In this next confrontation, I spar with another APKIDO instructor. Since most martial arts focus primarily in punching and kicking, flexibility, power, and speed are absolute prerequisites for those arts. Observe that as soon as I go into a clinch, the APKIDO instructor is deprived of his main requirement, the distance to strike. All the years of training are useless now, as soon as the fight goes to the ground. Out of desperation, he even tries to reach for my groin. As he feels the pressure on the choke increasing around his neck, he briefly struggles, then taps out. He acted like he was going to continue the fight, but realized that from this position it would not be a good idea. He wants a rematch, and I immediately take him down. I establish the mounted position, which makes him extremely vulnerable. The main advantage of this position is that I can punch him, but he cannot punch me back. As he struggles in vain to push me out, he exposes his arm. I could get him on an arm lock, but instead I choose to choke him out for the second time. He tries to reach for the groin, but the pressure on the neck makes him quickly change his mind. Still not convinced, he asked for a third match. His opponent is having a difficult time comprehending that his strikes are not as effective as he thought. It is hard for him to accept the painful reality that all his years of training may be in vain.
Perhaps he will never be able to understand what really happened, and what's worse, he might never consider incorporating Jiu-Jitsu into his training. Jiu-Jitsu is the only self-defense system that effectively addresses ground grappling, the most important yet most neglected aspect of any real fight.
Now the APKIDO instructor will be choked out for the third and final time.
The man wearing the red shirt is a APKIDO instructor who wanted to test his style against the effectiveness of Jiu-Jitsu.
While he looks for the right distance to strike, I keep myself safely out of reach. In a surprise move, I will close the distance and take him down. My opponent is unfamiliar with ground fighting, and he no longer has the angle or the distance to be effective with his strikes. As he struggles to get me out, I establish myself on the top mounted position. A couple of hits is all I need to bring panic into the scene. Jumping from the frying pan into the fire, the APKIDO instructor desperately turns around, unaware that a choke awaits him. If you're interested in martial arts, remember this. Out on the street, reality boils down to one thing. The fight will always end up on the ground.